So Vaughan Williams on the Fourth Symphony was on record as saying, "I don't even know if I like it, but it was what I thought at the time." And as you can hear, perhaps the later Vaughan Williams music is a little more conservative again. And the liberals and the conservatives, we saw in the 19th century, continues in the 20th. Rachmaninoff considered himself so conservative, and others did too, that sometimes he's portrayed as a romantic composer. Well, if we limit our definition of romanticism to things written before the year 1900, well, he's a 20th century, most of his output, like so many of these others, it's a piano virtuoso. And maybe he's selling him short of being an arch conservative, because this is a rhapsody on a theme of Paganini. Paganini being the violinistic equivalent of Franz Liszt on the piano in the early 19th century. Both were accused of selling their souls to the devil, and that's why they could play so well. No, they just practiced. Paganini, a little bit older, he could even be considered a late classical composer, and a bit of a conniver too. One of Paganini's extremely virtuosic pieces, which he would perform live, but always at a distance. No one could figure out how he could do it. Turns out he was playing it scordatura. He had changed the tuning on his violin, so it was much easier to play. Didn't bother to tell anybody. And that scordatura tradition of retuning one's string instrument actually happens in Mahler's scherzi sometimes, particularly he'll tune up the strings to make the violin sound kind of tinny and evil. And particularly in folk rock, a lot of times guitarists will use capos to alter the ease of playing as they go along. Okay, so with Rachmaninoff, the the Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini. Dum da 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 dum da 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 dum da 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 is the theme, and other people will trope it. Not only Rachmaninoff, but we'll see in the relatively late 20th century prince of a composer, the Polish composer Witold Lutosławski will use it in a double piano sonata. Marvelous to do his own dissonant root. You'll hear just the cool excerpt of this piece, and then because Paganini was associated with this like kind of devil-may-care aspect, later on Rachmaninoff throws the Dies Irae in there, da, 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 da. And then somehow even later, magically pulling a melodic rabbit out of a hat. Rabbit. We got some rabbits in the backyard here. He turns it into a rapturous melody, and so he's a romantic in the end. After that, just a little bit of Gustav Holst. He's, this is a composer only 2 years younger than Vaughan Williams, and they're good friends. They both engage in kind of musicological studies, researching the music of their homeland of the British Isles. And we know him from that diabolical Mars from the Planets, and the rest of the planets are totally great too, and it was written during World War I and da-da-da-da-da. But here's a little more the gentle side. He's also known for a couple of Christmas carols, among other wonderful pieces. And so this will be In the Bleak Midwinter, which evidently, since the last video, has gone away. Da 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 da, da 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 da. So that 18th variation, rhapsodic as it is actually just an inversion of the Paganini melody originally in the Rachmaninoff. Nice. He dies in 1943 in Beverly Hills, an expatriate. Many European composers come to America at this period. I guess we have the Nazis to thank for that, enriching American culture because everyone wants to get the hell out of Dodge and comes to the United States. Scientists, poets, painters, musicians, particularly composers, come here and enrich American culture. And many of them land either on the East Coast or in L.A. and the West Coast in general. And amongst those, Rachmaninoff, Beverly Hills, and in Brentwood, Arnold Schoenberg. And we'll talk about Schoenberg in just a few more minutes, but really what we're getting to right now is the notion that within one of his writings in 1944 says, it's a couple of sentences, and here's the first and the last. There's a great man here in America. He goes his own way. This is a paraphrase, but this is exact. His name is Ives. Not many people had heard of Charles Ives, who was a semi-prodigy, his church organist as a young man, although the prejudices, I suppose, against music in American culture versus other endeavors. An old woman at one point says to him, "Oh, Charlie, I understand you play. What do you play?" And he said, "Shortstop." Well, that's the way it goes. The Variations on America, a very early piece. It's My Country 'Tis of Thee, God Save the Queen. And even the variations start with the theme being very da 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 ba da bum ba 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 ba, and a little Spanish variation eventually dum da dum bum ba ba da 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 minor. It goes on, and then finally one that is bitonal. Hey, you bi? Yeah, tonal in two keys at once, or generally polytonality. Wow. Ives is way ahead of the curve. There are musicians in the old country who are doing things like this too, but it's actually going to be a little bit later when they really come to the fore. So, but nobody knows about what Ives is doing. Where did he get his ideas? Partially, profoundly, from his father, who was an eccentric band director and had Charlie early in life do such things as sing a folk melody, patriotic tune, in one key, while George accompanied him in another key. As well, being the band director in Danbury, Connecticut, sometimes he would divide his band into two sections, and maybe they played two different Sousa marches coming at each other from the end zones. The Liberty Bell, against the Stars and Stripes for colliding, contrary musics, spatial music, and evidently the Iveses, George and Charlie, would sit back and say, "Cool." Well, somehow early in his career, Ives realized he went to Yale. He studied with Horatio Parker, who actually was a pretty good composer. Just in the past couple of years with the Opus Project, I've gathered that he is not quite as much of a stick in the mud, as I would have thought he's been billed over the years. Nevertheless, Ives withheld his most radical music and only did the academic exercises with Parker. And when he graduated from Yale, he decided that he wouldn't let his family starve on the dissonances. So he became an insurance salesman. Eventually, partner in the firm Ives and Myrick. They pioneer estate planning. He commutes to New York from Danbury, Connecticut. And he writes his music on weekends and holidays, which is kind of a Gustav Mahler thing, except you're not conducting orchestras. 4 symphonies, and then you know. And we'll be focusing on the 4th Symphony. But before that, how about a little bit of the 2nd Symphony? This is the finale. It's probably the second greatest symphony of his after the 4th. And a plethora of pre-existent tunes in a kind of a happy amalgam, including Columbia, the gem of the ocean, and It's a Grand Old Flag, and finally at the end, Revelry, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and you'll hear the end with Leonard Bernstein conducting. Oh, the famous unanswered question, an example of spatial music, and that's music in different spaces, uh, physically separated. And so what's going on in this piece? We've got the silence of the Druids, the eternal unknowing universe, and that would be represented by the strings, and several, actually the same question asked again and again by a trumpet, a dissonant collection that has nothing to do with the white note modal harmony of this kind of slowed down, augmented chorale hymn tune. And we've heard recently, by the way, some wonderful augmentations and diminutions, such as in the Von Williams Symphony No. 4. And we're going to get to the Ives Fourth pretty soon. Every time the trumpet answers the question, 4 woodwinds. It's supposedly at a different part of the hall. Maybe the woodwinds are in the back, strings on stage, perhaps the trumpet on another balcony, and the woodwinds, 4 woodwinds. It could be 4 flutes, but he's a practical musician, so he says if you don't have 4 flutes, you can have an oboe and a clarinet in the mix, and they provide a series of answers, growing increasingly frustrated until by the end, the question is stupid. It's a lie. The heck with it. And we'll just hear the opening and ending frenetic, eventually frenetic answers.